Today, we're going to be using our newest piece of technology to make something for our oldest vehicle, and I think it's going to be pretty sweet. We're doing some 3D printing. Now, if you've been following along with our channel, you probably already know that we purchased quite a large 3D printer. It's the Anycubic Chiron. I might have butchered the pronunciation on that, so I'm sorry. But we specifically bought it for how large of a build volume it has. The build plate is 16 by 16 roughly, and the height that it can print to is about 18 inches, maybe just inside of those dimensions. But as you can imagine, that's actually pretty large for a 3D printer, and it was quite cost effective for the machine. For perspective, there's a little Dungeons & Dragons miniature sitting in the middle of the build plate there to give you an idea of just how big this thing is. In case you couldn't already tell, yes, I'm a nerd. So getting on to the project at hand, the Belle has had a sound system that I installed pretty much right when I got it on the road for quite some time. It was a kit that I purchased that uses kicker speakers, has two 6x9s in the package tray, and it has two 6-inch speakers in the kick panels up front. And it has a custom head unit that looks classic, but added like Bluetooth and things like that. It's been all right for a while, but it just doesn't have the low-end fill that I want, to be completely honest. Especially when the engine's running, it sounds like it has no low end at all. So I've been wanting to add a subwoofer for quite some time, but I don't need something that's going to like rattle the whole car, especially with how rusty the thing is, because I'm sure parts would just start falling off. So I had a pretty good solution. The F-150, the 94 that you've seen in some of our videos, the red one, I had that truck for quite some time as my daily driver, and at that time I had purchased an all-in-one amplifier, low-profile 10-inch sub, and enclosure, and it was fantastic, especially being a single cab. The amount of bass in that tiny space was amazing, and it was nice because it was just all-in-one. You just literally hooked it up to the stereo and it worked. Well, when I handed off the truck, my dad basically did not need that bass, so I actually have kept that for quite some time, and I've been thinking if I wanted to put that in the Chevy or not, and I finally decided, you know what, it's taking up space in my workshop, and I'm complaining about a lack of bass in the Bel Air. Why would I not just put the two things together? So the challenge then was, how am I going to get this thing into the Bel Air in a location that I like? And you're probably thinking, okay, so you have the most giant trunk in the entire world and this low-profile 10-inch sub, and you're having trouble finding a space for it. But that's exactly the problem. The trunk is so big, and the sub is so flat and relatively small, that putting it somewhere in the trunk, it just is sort of sitting there. It doesn't have like a custom enclosure. It doesn't have, something that'll contour to the inside of the fender. And normally I would put it up on the shelf inside of the trunk, but my air ride is there, as well as the amplifier and the speakers dip through the package tray, right? So that whole space is fully taken up. So I can't put it up there, and I also don't want to put it vertical there because that would block the view of the nice air ride setup that I have. So I had a creative solution. And that brings us here, to my office. So I had figured out that I want to mount the subwoofer assembly at an angle, kind of pointing back and slightly up, over on the side where the spare tire is, and that I would need some sort of platform to put it on to do that. It would kind of stop it from taking up too much of the floor space in the trunk. It would give it a nice angle. It would be nice and visible and look tasteful. So I was starting to look at getting some pieces of MDF. You'd have to kind of, measure them, cut them, glue them and screw them together like you normally would with a subwoofer box, carpet the whole thing. That's not too scary of a proposition, but then I had a bit of a brainwave that could save me a little bit of money and save me time in its own unique way. So I'm sorry I'm not fancy enough to have figured out a screen recorder yet. Y'all are going to have to deal with me using my phone, filming my laptop screen, because we're low tech here. So I basically designed this. It's a wedge-shaped mount, and very simple design, just has kind of like the flat bottom and back for support, and then basically this angle. And I measured this height here and the length here to make sure that this plane was the correct size to mount the subwoofer to. So I thought this was pretty cool, and basically, yeah, I threw it together real quick and then got it ready to go into the slicer. What I didn't account for was the fact that I had an object here that was 15-something inches wide, I think 10-something inches deep, and pretty monstrous in the terms of 3D printing. And it just didn't click with me how long something like that takes to print. So when I threw this into Ultimaker and I sliced it, everything was looking good. It looked like it would print fine. And then it registered with me how much time and material it was going to take. So yeah, This is usually underestimated, by the way, so that would probably be closer to 10 days of nonstop printing. And you see 1,250 grams of filament, right? Now, 1,250 grams, so that's basically 1.25 entire spools of filament into what is essentially just a simple little platform. And then is when it clicked with me that, all right, this thing's probably a little bit over-engineered, to be completely honest. And by that, I should actually say it's under-engineered. I hadn't taken into account some of the limitations and things like that that come with 3D printing, and essentially I've created this thing that's way overkill for what I actually needed to do. So I found some ways to basically cut back on the printing time and material used, and have something that was not only just as sturdy as I need it to be, but actually looked much more interesting as well. And so version 2 was born. As you can see, I carved out some big chunks in the sides here. That was just all unneeded space. I mean, really, I just needed these planes here where the feet of the subwoofer could attach, and it needed structure, to keep the front and rear in line. And then you see how I've got the L shape here at the back. This is for some torsional rigidity. It stops everything from being able to twist apart. So essentially, by simplifying it down and cutting out a lot of this volume at both the bottom and in the sides, that cut down on the print time a lot and actually made for a much more interesting looking piece. And here we are back again in Curo, which is the slicer. This is the new one. And I played with a couple of things other than just the model itself as well. So I increased the line height to something just a little, more rough and ready. It didn't need all that extra detail. I also thinned out the infill pattern. So originally I had this running at 25% infill. I cut that down to 15% infill because at this scale, that would be ample strength to do what this thing needs to do. And as you can tell, that cut down the time significantly. So this actually probably will be closer to 2 days of printing. But you can see it will use 1/2 of a spool of filament. So it's about $10 worth of filament. And when you get right down to it, it didn't take me long at all to make these edits, and $10 worth of filament to have this part created. I think this is actually essentially a cost savings and an effort savings over making this thing by hand. And now it has been exported onto this little guy here, and we're on our way to the workshop. So if you're curious to see me setting this machine up and things like that, you can check out some of our other 3D printing videos on the channel. For now, I'm just going to jump right in and show you some clips of the process, and I'll just try and catch it along the way at different points because it's going to be a while. It's looking like this is going to basically take about 2 days. So I'm just going to check in periodically, film little clips of it at different stages, and hopefully you'll kind of get to see the thing, as it gets built. I should also note that we're on the march to 2,000 subscribers, and every single one of you does help. So if you didn't mind taking the 2 seconds to subscribe to the channel, it would really mean the world to us. It really, really helps the channel grow, and we do think you're going to like more of the content that comes out in the future. So I appreciate it, and now on to the printing. So it looks like we have a little bit of stringing going on here. Basically, when the head moves back and forth between the 2 columns, it is, just has a little bit of drag where it kind of stretches a little bit of the filament. And on something this big, that's really not too big of an issue, but if you're doing a more small, detailed print, that can be kind of a nuisance. As you can see, it's got the kind of triangle pattern filling the whole thing. And my hope is that this design has enough structural integrity to support the subwoofer at an angle. So I've cut these big notches in the side, as you can see, where basically, it just kind of saves material. I don't think it needed to be a solid slab, so this thing's relatively close to done. I'd say by about noon, this will probably be finished, and I'm kind of excited to see how this thing goes. So as you can see here on the screen, it's been printing for 46 hours and 3 minutes, and it's 90% done. However, I'm pretty sure that this percentage meter goes by the number of layers printed. So as the layers get physically smaller, which you can see now we're only printing this small area for each layer versus printing this ginormous layer that it was having to do the first, couple dozen layers. So it's going to accelerate. So, after the first 8 or so hours, it wasn't even 1% done. But now, it's hauling, a lot faster. So, kind of interesting the way it works, but I'll run you through, a little bit more about this thing once we're pretty much done. Alright, it took just under 48 hours, and it is done. So, I'll kind of give you a tour of why I designed it this way, and we'll kind of mock the subwoofer up on it as well so we can make sure it looks like it's going to do the job. And now the build plate has cooled down. Because the model is this big, it released on its own, which is pretty cool. Feels pretty sturdy, no flex, which is what we're hoping for. So I'm going to kind of trim some of these little stringy bits off here, get this thing tidied up, and then we'll drop the sub on here. So removing these is really easy. The printer comes with these little convenient shears, and they do a really nice job of just trimming off any of the excess like that. And then if you want to get really pedantic, you can also sand it down and get the little remaining nubs off. I can get a little more flush if I'm using my right hand, but I'm using my left while I film. But as you can see, it's real quick, real easy just to remove these little guys like that. So I'm going to go around and do the whole thing, and then I'll kind of give it a tidy up, and then we'll drop the sub on it. Alright, so now that the mount for the subwoofer is completed printing, we are going to basically work on attaching the subwoofer to the mount, which is pretty straightforward, honestly. I'm actually going to use the standard mounting screws that the subwoofer came with. I'm actually reusing them from the truck. They're a little rusty, but nothing fancy, so I don't think they'll be too bad, and the heads are in good shape, so the part that you'll actually see is going to be a non-issue. It's just the bottoms are a little rusty there. But essentially, I'm going to try just mounting this with the screws right into the plastic from the 3D print. It is an insulated rubber foot that it's going through, so I don't think it's going to blow the plastic out. And if it does, I have a backup plan, but the backup plan is going to be a larger diameter hole, so I'd rather start with the smaller one. If that fails, then I can move to the larger one. However, if I start with the larger one, I can't go the other way. So we're going to work on basically drilling just some small pilot holes to help the screws get started. And then basically we're going to get this thing mounted onto the bracket and go from there. Alright, so as you see, we got the bracket right here on the workbench, and conveniently the angle that it sits at, the subwoofer is actually able to rest on it without sliding off, which has been lovely. So I'm actually going to rest the subwoofer in place. That'll show me exactly where I need to drill these little pilot holes, and we're just going to zip right through that top layer and put the screws in. So here it is with the subwoofer in place, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is a Rockville RC 10A, I believe it is. Hang on, let's double check. RW10CA, as you can see right there. So this is a low profile 10-inch woofer, and it's got the amplifier and everything built in. So really, this bracket is actually just to mount it in the location and at the angle that I want it to sit at. It doesn't have any other purpose than just keeping it in a tidy place in the trunk. Alright, as you can see, we have the woofer and enclosure and amp combo sitting on the new pedestal nicely. And again, it's not screwed on, it's actually just resting in place, and it doesn't slide off, which is kind of cool. So we're going to work on drilling these pilot holes now. So I'm basically going to just drill right in the center here of the rubber mount. I'm not going to film myself doing it because the camera won't, be able to be held at a... Well, actually, I might be able to... Hang on. Here we go. Man, the things I do for you guys. If I screw this up, it's your fault. Alright, wait for it. Okay, we have a little hole. So, hopefully, that landed in the right place. Alright, so we have success. Basically, the little pilot holes that I drilled work nicely. I got a little bit too small of a screwdriver, but basically, the screws are biting in nicely here, and I'm just going to nip them up so they seat down on these rubber feet. But as you can see, I have screws started on all four sides. Realized I was holding you upside down there. Haha. So, I'm going to get these things tightened up, but this whole assembly will be together. So this isn't a video on how to actually wire up the sub. I'm going to skip all that, save you guys the time. I'm sure you don't need to see that. It works just like any other one. If you do have questions about it, feel free to shoot them in the comments. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Mostly, I just wanted to show you how the thing looks and how we solved this packaging issue. So we're going to jump over to the car and let you see what it looks like. So what do you guys think? Do you like the way it looks? I personally love it. The sound is fantastic. It does exactly what I need. It fills in the bottom end, and I can actually hear some of the bass now, even when the car is running. It's phenomenal. So I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. And of course, thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. We do really appreciate it. We are marching for 2,000 subscribers as soon as possible. It really helps us grow if you do hit that subscribe button. And even if you don't want to subscribe, there's always the like button as well. That helps the video get seen too. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. And before any of you jump in the comments saying, oh yeah, it's not held down, I've actually used Velcro. I basically put a square of Velcro around the bottom border of the entire mount, and I've adhered it to the vinyl trunk liner. That should be ample to hold it in place. I just cruise the car around. I'm not whipping it around corners. And honestly, it actually provides a nice amount of damping, which kind of stops it from like rattling and stuff like that. So it should be effective. And of course, if I ever have issues with it, I can always move to something a little more sturdy if I need to. You know, I could use screws or something like that. But for the time being, I think the Velcro is going to do just fine, and it does everything I need.